If you're a fan of the Dallas Cowboys, Week 17 couldn't have been any worse for you. And I'm not talking about the fact that the Eagles clinched the NFC East. By the way, I've got to give credit to Carson Wentz. What he's doing with this depleted roster in Philadelphia is nothing short of remarkable. He doesn't have a receiver with over 500 yards this year. He's throwing to guys that we've never heard of. Boston fucking Scott was the hero in that game against the Giants on Sunday. He's like the fourth or fifth string running back. It's a nice story in Philadelphia. This team should not be in the playoffs right now. The Eagles should open up a hospital on their sideline. They could keep it in business. Every other play, it seems like they're carting someone off the field. Philadelphia is a nice story, but the fantasy ends this weekend. This team is not advancing in the playoffs. The NFC is just too deep. But let's get back to the Cowboys. Sunday could not have been any worse if you're a Cowboys fan. If I'm a fan of the Dallas Cowboys, I'm pulling for a brutal, ugly loss to the Redskins. The last thing I want is a dominant performance. The last thing I want is this team to come together and play like they should have been playing all season. But that is exactly what happened. And it could have saved the job of Jason Garrett. One of the main problems in Dallas is Jerry Jones makes decisions based off of his emotions. We all know that Jason Garrett should have been fired years ago. The guy has compiled more 8-8 records than any other coach in NFL history. I say it all the time. In the NFL, and especially in the NBA, you either want to be really good or really bad. The last thing you want in the NFL or the NBA is to be mediocre. The Bungles, the Dolphins, the Redskins, they're going to be in position to draft a potentially franchise-changing player. The Cowboys are going to be stuck in the middle of the first round with no decision other than to franchise tag Dak through next season. I mean, who else are the Cowboys going to get at quarterback? Andy Dalton? I mean, I'm sure he'll be available, but do you really want him? I mean, is Andy Dalton better than Dak Prescott? I don't think so. Jerry Jones does a lot of things well. The Cowboys draft well, or they have in recent years. Their facilities are world class. He markets his team better than every other NFL owner. Everyone has an opinion of the Dallas Cowboys. You either love them or you hate them. You bring up the Dallas Cowboys in casual conversation, someone's going to have an opinion one way or the other. You can't say the same about a team like the Miami Dolphins or the Chargers. But something he doesn't do well is hire head coaches. He hasn't hired a great head coach since Jimmy Johnson. And Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones really came into the NFL together. They were kind of figuring it out together as they went along. Now, Jerry Jones brought in Bill Parcells to revitalize the franchise after the late 90s. Jerry couldn't get out of his fucking way. He basically ran Bill Parcells off. Dave Campo was hired, terrible. Wade Phillips, mediocre. Chan Gailey, mediocre. Jason Garrett, the definition of mediocre. For the past 20 years, the Dallas Cowboys have been a model of inconsistency. The only thing that this team, this franchise, been consistent at is being average. 8-8, 7-9, 8-8, 9-7. Every fucking year. It wouldn't shock me at this point if Jason Garrett is brought back next season. Jerry Jones loves the guy. He looks at him like a son. Dak Prescott didn't help matters when he came out in support of his head coach in his post-game presser. Something Jason Garrett said in his post-game press conference tells you all you need to know about why he shouldn't be brought back next season. Someone asked him a question. I believe it was about his future with the Cowboys. Jason Garrett said that he wanted to relish this moment, enjoy this victory with his team. Dude, you're 8-8. You and your team have underachieved all year. You have struggled your entire tenure in Dallas, beating teams above 500. You'll be watching the playoffs from home for the 7th time in 10 years. And you want to relish a sweet victory against the Washington fucking Redskins? As of Monday night, Jerry Jones has yet to make a decision on the future of Jason Garrett. That speaks volumes to me. It tells me that Jerry Jones is having difficulty letting Jason Garrett go. Like I said earlier, he makes decisions based on emotions. He lets his feelings get in the way. Maybe we'll find out this week what's going to go on in Dallas in terms of the career or the future of Jason Garrett. All right, Behind the Line, episode 37. I'm your host, KC. Follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. Hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube. Leave me a 5-star rating on iTunes. We got a lot to get to today. Coaches are being fired left and right. We'll get to some of them in a second. But first, let's get to two teams that have competent head coaches. The final game of the NFL regular season Sunday night was a slugfest. We could see a potential third matchup between Seattle and San Francisco in the playoffs. I can't take anything away from the 49ers. This team deserves to be the number 1 seed in the NFC. I talked last week about NFL officiating overshadowing a lot of the good shit that's going on in the NFL this year. It happened again on Sunday night. First off, the Seahawks lost this game all by themselves. I'm not going to sit here and say the missed pass interference in the end zone on the final drive of the game is the reason that Seattle lost this game. I got to point to a lot of other things, like the delay of game from the 1-yard line on first down. Completely inexcusable. But the missed pass interference definitely impacted the final result. It wasn't the reason Seattle lost, but it had a direct impact on the final result of the game. You can't miss that call. Not with the ability to review it and challenge it. The Seahawks couldn't challenge it. It happened with less than 2 minutes to go in the game. They were waiting and waiting and waiting for the booth to review this call. It never happened. This has got to fucking stop. It's almost comical at this point if it weren't so damn frustrating with how incompetent these NFL officials have become. What's worse, the league said the officials were right not throwing the flag. Al Riveron, the senior vice president of officiating, said that it wasn't an infraction. If that wasn't pass interference, I don't know what the fuck is. This is the same thing I talked about last week. The problem with officiating in the NFL isn't getting fixed because the league doesn't think it has a problem. I don't think Seattle has enough to make a deep run in the playoffs. Marshawn Lynch was a complete non-factor Sunday night, which was to be expected. I mean, how much can we expect from a 33-year-old running back that hasn't touched a football field in over 400 days? I don't care how good of shape you're in. At 33 years old, you don't just walk on the field and return to beast mode from 2011. Now, I do think Seattle will go to Philadelphia next weekend and win. They're nowhere near as banged up as the Eagles, but I can't see this team going on the road to San Francisco in the divisional round and beating the 49ers. Now, the 49ers, on the other hand, this team is built for a Super Bowl run, but I don't think this is the year for San Francisco. If I'm the 49ers, I am praying that Green Bay or Minnesota can knock off New Orleans. I don't think any team in the league wants to face the Saints right now. This team is playing at a high level on both sides, offense and defense. Drew Brees looks as good as we've seen in years. I said on Twitter Sunday, I think the Saints not getting a bye week could actually end up being a good thing. Could be a blessing in disguise. Yeah, the extra week of rest would have been nice. It would have been good. They need some of their guys to get healthy. But the last thing you want, if your team is hot and on a roll, is to go a week without playing football. It's hard to carry that momentum across 2 weeks. It also helped my bank account for New Orleans to be in the wild card round because instead of me paying $600 to $800 for a hotel room when I go to the playoffs next week, I only had to pay $150. Saints' first home playoff game wasn't until the divisional round, national championship game is that weekend on that Monday, hotels in New Orleans would be super expensive. So, thank you, San Francisco, for beating Seattle. All right, enough of my selfishness. Let's get back to the Saints. I don't think traveling to Green Bay or San Francisco is going to be a problem for this team. I think the Packers are overrated, at least relative to their 13-3 record. This might be the worst 13-3 team I've ever seen. Do they look like a 13-3 team to you? I mean, they damn near lost to the fucking Lions on Sunday. The Niners beat the hell out of them a few weeks ago. Aaron Rodgers and Packers fans keep trumpeting this fact that they win these ugly games, these close, ugly games. Eventually, that evens itself out. Usually, it happens in the playoffs when you're playing the best teams in the league. Mistakes get magnified. Matt LaFleur is a nice story. First Packers coach to ever go 13-3 in the first season. But he doesn't want to see Sean Payton and Drew Brees come to Lambeau Field. Aaron Rodgers is still great, but he's not the same quarterback he was 6 or 7 years ago. This offense is actually dependent on Aaron Jones, the running back. In Green Bay's 3 losses this season, Aaron Jones was held under 50 yards rushing in each of those 3 games. The Saints have one of the best run defenses in the league. Dennis Allen will key into stopping Aaron Jones and make the other Aaron beat him. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. Saints had to get past the Vikings first. On the AFC side of the playoff picture, obviously, like it has been the past 2 months, Baltimore is the clear favorite. They beat the Steelers Sunday with their fucking backups. As predicted on this podcast back in September, the Titans are the number 6 seed. They traveled to New England this weekend to play Tom Brady and the struggling New England Patriots. How in the hell do the Patriots lose at home to the Miami Dolphins? This is unheard of in the Brady-Belichick era. New England's had a first-round bye each of the past 10 years. I'm always hesitant to go against them, but I think the Titans go into Foxborough and win this weekend. Something seems off to me between Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. Now, this is just speculation on my part. I don't have inside information. I haven't read anything about this, but part of me feels like Bill Belichick has a little bit of resentment towards Tom Brady for not retiring, for continuing to play even though his skills have obviously diminished. Belichick drafted Jimmy G in 2014, the quarterback of the future, or at least he thought. The guy who would get them through the post-Tom Brady era. He had to trade him. Now he's watching him lead one of the best teams in the league, while Belichick and his offense have struggled the entire season. Tom Brady has been downright terrible the last half of this season. He's only completing 57% of his passes. He's had one good game the last 8 weeks. That was 2 weeks ago against the Bills. Other than that one game, he's actually been a liability for New England this season. Sometimes guys just don't know when to let go. Tom Brady loves the game of football. It's no secret. I mean, he's not playing for the money at this point of his career. He's made his hundreds of millions. He's married to Gisele Bundchen. She's got more money than he does. So it's not the money that's keeping him playing. I think Bill Belichick is going to have to force Tom Brady out of New England. And it could happen this offseason. I don't think he wants him back next year. I know that's crazy to say. I mean, they've won 6 Super Bowls together. But the guy we're seeing week in and week out is not the same Tom Brady. Now, like I said, that's pure speculation on my part. I'm just going off of what I've observed this season. Tom Brady's not the only legendary quarterback staring at the possible end of his career. It's likely that the Chargers are going to move on from Phillip Rivers, and he's not ready to retire. Eli Manning's career path is also uncertain. He said he was not returning to the Giants to back up Daniel Jones. Manning said being a backup isn't fun. Unlike Phillip Rivers, though, Eli Manning is actually contemplating retirement. We're staring down the barrel of the end of an era in the NFL. In the next 1, 2, maybe 3 years, We're going to be waving goodbye to Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Big Ben, Eli Manning, possibly Aaron Rodgers, Phillip Rivers. I hope Phillip Rivers gets a chance next season with an actual Super Bowl contender. It sucks that he spent his entire career with a second-rate organization. He was emotional after the loss to the Chiefs Sunday. He began to tear up when asked about his future and the possibility that he won't be back next season. Now, will another team give Phillip Rivers a chance? He's coming off the worst season of his NFL career. He would have led the league in turnovers this year, but his ass was saved by Jameis Winston, who did himself no favors Sunday against the Falcons. It was only fitting for the Tampa Bay season to end with a Jameis Winston interception. A pick six at that. You can't make this shit up. But where is Phillip Rivers going to go? If he's not going to be back with the Chargers next year, where does he go? I'm sure there will be someone who will give him a chance, but at this stage of his career, he needs to play on a team that has Super Bowl aspirations. Most of your contenders already have their quarterback. If Drew Brees retires this year, New Orleans has Teddy Bridgewater. Seattle, Russell Wilson. Niners, Jimmy G. Bills, Texans, Titans, all have a quarterback in place. I think the best place for Phillip Rivers to end his career is in Indianapolis with the Colts. Peyton Manning left the Colts, won a Super Bowl with the Broncos. It would only be fitting for Phillip Rivers to leave the Chargers and go try to win a Super Bowl with the Colts. The Colts are ready-made for a Super Bowl run. They're just missing the quarterback. Jacoby Brissett is not the answer. He's limited. He can't throw the ball downfield. Indy's got the defense, one of the best offensive lines in the league. They've got the receivers. They've got the tight end. Frank Reich is a good head coach. They go out and pick up Phillip Rivers in free agency. They're immediately a Super Bowl contender in 2020. All right, let's get to the coaches who got fired. I'm not going to talk too much about Pat Shurmur. We all saw that coming. Freddie Kitchens was finally fired by the Cleveland Browns. It was a long time coming. Freddie Kitchens actually thought that he had the support of the organization. I saw it reported on Twitter. I can't remember who said it, but they had a conversation with Freddie Kitchens, and he was very emotional because he felt like he was backstabbed by the Cleveland Browns. He felt like that they were going to bring him back next season. Now, I don't know what was said behind closed doors, but is Freddie Kitchens out of his fucking mind? They just said in early December that if they saw a collapse, that Freddie Kitchens was going to be gone. I don't know how much more of a collapse that you could get. They were 1-4 to close the year. Well, I mean, I guess you could go 0-5. That would be a bigger collapse. The question is, though, where do the Browns go from here? Think about this from a coach's perspective for a second. If you're Urban Meyer, Mike McCarthy, or, a big-name head coach, would you take a job with this dysfunctional clusterfuck of an organization? Cleveland has hired 6 coaches in the last 10 years. This team cycles through head coaches quicker than any other NFL franchise. Damn near every year, new head coach for the Browns. You got a young quarterback in Baker Mayfield that, let's be honest, is not very good. Makes bad decisions, both on and off the field. He cares more about being a superstar than he does about leading his team. There are serious leadership issues on this roster. It was reported that Cleveland was interested in Ron Rivera. He said, no thanks. I'll head over to D.C., coach the Redskins. The problem for the Browns is the Giants' vacant position is much more appealing. If you're Mike McCarthy or some other coach looking for a job, where would you rather be? A team with Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley? An organization that has won 2 Super Bowls in the last 10, 15 years? Or would you rather be in Cleveland, the joke of the NFL, a team that hasn't made the playoffs in 17 years, with a quarterback that is a headache to deal with, a roster full of players that are begging to be anywhere other than Cleveland? Don't get me wrong, firing Freddie Kitchens was the right decision. They should have never hired him in the first place. Should have went with Bruce Arians. If you wanted to keep Freddie Kitchens, let him be the offensive coordinator. But they should have hired Bruce Arians last offseason. That decision's coming back to bite them in the ass. But now, the Browns have a new problem. Who do we hire? You're not going to get a big-name head coach go to Cleveland. Just not going to happen. This team needs an alpha male coach, a leader. Josh McDaniel is reportedly being given consideration by Cleveland, also being considered by Carolina. But I don't think that's the way to go. His tenure in Denver was a disaster. He was fired midway through his second season. Some guys just aren't cut out to be a head coach in this league. They're better off as coordinators. I think Josh McDaniels is one of those guys. I think Ron Rivera was the best option for the Browns, but he wasn't interested. Redskins are going to hire him. Ron Rivera is used to dealing with a diva quarterback. The guy took Cam Newton to a Super Bowl. If anyone could change the career trajectory of Baker Mayfield, I think it was Ron Rivera. But guys like that aren't interested in the Browns' job because of the reputation of this franchise. There are certain teams in the NFL with a reputation of dysfunction. The Browns are at the top of that list. All right, let's get to college football for a second. I thought Ohio State Clemson was the best college football game of the season. That's the type of games we should be getting out of college football every week. We shouldn't have to wait until late December to get competitive games in college football. I was impressed with Trevor Lawrence and Clemson. Lawrence took an absolute beating in that game, but kept getting up and kept making plays. Led them down the field in the fourth quarter with ease and what ended up being the game-winning touchdown drive. I was skeptical of Clemson going into that matchup with Ohio State. I actually liked Ohio State to win that game. When I released my pick for this game last week, I said that the Buckeyes would jump out to an early lead, and I didn't think Clemson would be able to overcome it because they haven't had to do that all season. I was wrong. Obviously, I was wrong. Dabo Swinney was outcoached the entire first half and then came out in the second half, and it all belonged to Clemson. Now, that being said, this team doesn't stand a chance against LSU. We're going to have to listen to Dabo Swinney over the next week or so spout about how his team is still not getting respect, how everyone is doubting them in the national championship game. I've said it all year. There isn't a team in the country that can beat LSU. I bet this game as soon as this line was released. When I saw LSU minus 3.5, I jumped all over it. People are now saying that Oklahoma didn't belong in the playoffs because LSU beat the shit out of them. That would have been the case no matter who was the number 4 seed. You think the result of that game would have been any different if it were Michigan, Penn State, Oregon, Notre Dame? I don't give a fuck. Throw anybody you want in there. The result would have been the same. It likely could have been worse. Oklahoma was a great team. They just ran into a buzzsaw in Joe Burrow. I feel like LSU is miles ahead of Clemson. This team has been tested all season long. 4 games against teams in the top 15. They're 4-0. Dominated Georgia in the SEC championship game against a defense that at the time was said to be one of the best in the country. I left my house to head to a sports bar to watch the LSU-Oklahoma game. When I left my house, the score was 14-7. By the time I made it to the bar 15 minutes later, it was 35-7. This team can score quickly and easily. I just don't think Clemson can keep up. People are hailing Ed Orgeron as this great, phenomenal head coach. I'm not a believer. The guy caught lightning in a bottle this year with this team, mainly with Joe Burrow. This same thing happened a few years ago in Auburn. Gene Chizik is a genius. Gene Chizik is a great head coach. He's our coach of the future. No. Gene Chizik had Cam Newton. Where the hell is Gene Chizik now? Does anyone know? He's off the fucking radar. Same with Ed Orgeron. Once Joe Burrow is gone, things will return to normal in Baton Rouge. Before this season, this LSU offense under Ed Orgeron struggled to put up points. Every year, this team 9-4, 10-3. When he was at Ole Miss, he stunk out the joint. He was 10-25 in 3 years. USC took a look at him for 8 games midway through the 2013 season. They said, nah, no thanks, we'll pass. It's a great story for this year. LSU's going to win the national title. Ed Orgeron is going to get his ring. Then, everything will go back to normal. In 6, 7, 8 years from now, we will be asking the same thing about Ed Orgeron that I just asked about Gene Chizik. Where is he? Because he'll be off the radar. All right, I'm going to close out with the NBA. A few weeks ago, I said I wasn't talking about this team until they fired Alvin Gentry. Well, I lied. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse for the New Orleans Pelicans, somehow, some way, this team is beginning to right the ship. The Pelicans have won 5 of their last 6 games, 4 in a row. Over that stretch, they're the number 3 defense in the NBA. Derek Favors' return to this lineup has paid dividends, especially defensively. Lonzo Ball is all of a sudden transformed into an efficient three-point shooter. I don't know where the hell that came from. He made 7 threes the other night against Houston. In the past 5 games, he's shooting 47% from beyond the arc. That is Steph Curry-like numbers. Zion Williamson is expected to return in January. Yet to see him in the regular season, but Zion balled out in the preseason. Led the Pelicans to an undefeated record in the preseason, but that don't mean much. It's a positive sign, though, what this team can do when the roster is fully healthy. So when Zion returns, could the New Orleans Pelicans actually make the playoffs? After losing 13 in a row, could this team end up playing in April, May, or June? Not June, April, May. Right now, they're 11-23. They're 3.5 games outside of the number 8 seed in the Western Conference. Going into the season, I didn't expect this team to contend for an NBA title. But I did expect them to make the playoffs. I thought they had the talent to at least make the 8 seed in the Western Conference. I could see this team getting hot when Zion returns and pushing for the playoffs. The talent's there. David Griffin's assembled a talented roster. I think it just took a while for Alvin Gentry to figure out how to use them effectively. He's changed the defensive schemes. He started to coach this roster to its strengths. They started dropping their bigs in pick and roll situations, and they're forcing their opponents into tougher shots. It's all paying off. For the first time all season, I'm actually optimistic about the Pelicans. And don't at me with the excuses of them playing depleted teams the past 5 or 6 games. KC, the Rockets sat James Harden, Clint Capella, Russell Westbrook. Dame Lillard had the worst shooting night of his career against them. Who fucking cares? Don't rain on my Pelicans parade. We've been without our best player the entire season. And we've won 11 games, damn it. Let me enjoy this progress. I still don't think Alvin Gentry is the right coach for this team. But maybe he can change my mind. If he gets them into the playoffs, maybe my mind will be changed about Alvin Gentry. Even still, I only think that he can take this team so far. I don't think Alvin Gentry is a championship-level head coach. And that's what New Orleans needs if they expect to keep Zion Williamson past his second contract. All right, that's all for today. I'll be back on Friday. Hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube. Leave me a 5-star rating on iTunes. Hope you guys have a safe and happy new year. I will see you in 2020.